Good evening, and welcome to the Domestic Violence Awareness Month program. This program is a partnership with the Clemson African American Museum, the Clemson University Office of Access and Equity, It's On Us, Safe Harbor, the City of Clemson Police Department, Victim Services, and the Arts Center. I want to thank Mayor Halfacre, City Administrator Andy Blondeau, City Councilwoman Alicia Smith, the committee members who helped put and produce this program, Camden, Amanda, Callie, and I'm going by names that I saw on, on the computer. So if that's not your full name, I'm sorry. Sarah, Kyla, Crystal, and Megan. Matthew Jordan for the graphic design and Instagram post. Public Works, Cat Bus, IT Lowell, and Tommy. All the volunteers that came out today, Robert Kemp, Joetta and Ron Gann, Jody Usher, Felicia Bennett. And if I've missed anyone, please forgive me. My name is Angela Agard, and I am the Executive Director of the Clemson Area African American Museum. The Clemson Area African American Museum is a museum managed by the City of Clemson. CAAAM collects, interprets, exhibits, and preserves the history of African Americans in the city of Clemson and upstate South Carolina, from the period of the arrival of the first African in this region until present day, by collecting books, documents, artifacts, and other cultural objects, preserving them and interpreting them for the public by means of museum exhibitions, educational programs, lectures, public events, and publications, and to encourage others to collect and preserve the history of African Americans in upstate South Carolina, and to do everything worthwhile to carry out our purpose. I am currently collecting artifact stories, articles pertaining to African American neighborhoods in the city of Clemson, Calhoun, Golden View, Abel, Cadillac Heights, and Red Hills. Some of you here today have been very generous with your time, assisting me with learning about the rich and vibrant local African American community here in the city of Clemson and upstate South Carolina by providing me with photos, documents, and stories. Thank you, and I still need more. Opening this year is an exhibit of the Rosenwald School in Pickens County. Julius Rosenwald was the president of Sears and Roebuck and used some of his wealth to build schools in the South for African Americans in the early 1900s. The exhibition that will follow will be about the local Black neighborhoods in the city of Clemson, how they came about, who were the anchors in the community, and the continuation with education and businesses in those communities. December 26th through the 30th of this year, we will be celebrating 5 days of Kwanzaa. Look for more information on our website, CAAAM, CAAAM.org, Instagram, and Facebook. Also, the volunteers and the founding members of CAAAM transitioned into a 501c3 fundraising group to support the mission and programs of the museum. I believe a few of our friends of CAAAM members are here. If you could raise your hand and let people know who you are. Thank you for coming out. Yes. Thank you for your service and support in the new chapter of the museum. A few housekeeping items. The bathrooms are located on my right through the doors back this way. You have the men and women's bathrooms. The emergency exits that way. You can go out the front door also. And we were going to have seating outside for socially distancing, but it looks like it's supposed to thunderstorm, so we're all in here. There are tables and with resource information in the back. There's refreshments on the side, and there will be announcements about counselors who are available in the event that they're needed. Students, please make sure you sign in, especially if you want credit from your teacher. We have the sign-in sheets on the table with the refreshments. And I will be submitting that information to whichever teacher asks for it. So if you're here and you need credit, please make sure you sign in. If you are online and you need to send me information that you were watching online, my email address is aagard@cityofclemson.org. You could drop me a line. The lineup for this evening is going to be, I'm going to have Ms. Megan Fallon come up and make a few remarks. We have Amanda Callahan from Safe Harbor. She will be coming in live streaming. Then I will come back and introduce Sabrina Greenlee, who will share her story. And then we will have a few minutes of Q&A. Megan, the mic is yours.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. And for those of you who had to tune in online, we really appreciate you being here as well. I do want to, real quick, before we get this started, we did a giveaway for folks who signed in at the front. And so I have a few names and some items that you can choose from. Nikki Narain, and I apologize if I say anybody's names wrong. Can't go wrong with purple for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and Clemson, of course. Sharon Fennell. And Emily Goad. All right, and I would like to note, I want to highlight that the resources that are available if folks are triggered or have a friend or family member that they're concerned about, we have local resources around the room. We have for Clemson faculty, staff, and students, we have some folks here who can help, including if you need guidance on figuring out where to go, which one, I'm happy to help with that, but CAPS is our confidential resource, and they're right over in this corner. And we also have a room available outside. Should anyone find themselves needing a minute to compose themselves or feeling connected to the issue deeply and just needing to process that with somebody, we do have counselors here who are available. In addition to that, Angela, you said a lot of things I was going to say, so I just want to make sure I don't repeat too much, but I hope everybody has a good event. And did we say where the bathrooms are? Okay, and please everyone make sure your phones are silenced or shut off for our wonderful speaker.
At this time, we're going to have some words from Amanda Callahan from Safe Harbor. And she'll be on the screen over here.
Awesome. Am I good, Angela? Okay.
Yes, you're great.
Awesome. Well, good evening. And my name is Amanda Callahan, and I am grateful to be here tonight. When I'm incredibly honored to share a stage with Angela and Megan and Sabrina as well. And I am very thankful for Lowell for live streaming me in. Unfortunately, at this time at Safe Harbor, as you can imagine, the safety of our clients is our utmost concern. And so our COVID policies really prevent us right now from being out in the community. We have to shut down the shelters every time we have an exposure. And you can imagine how complicated the logistics become when we operate 3 shelters and have 50 full-time staff out in the community. And so I am very grateful that Safe Harbor was invited to this campus event. Very grateful for the partnership of the Clemson African American Museum. And I am so excited that you guys get to hear from Sabrina. I personally have heard her speak so many times. She is a close friend of Safe Harbor. We have admired the work that she's done over the years, and you are in for a roller coaster ride of emotions, but an incredible and inspiring story. So stay tuned for that. But I am here to just really briefly tell you a little bit about Safe Harbor and want to echo all the things that Megan said. There are so many wonderful community resources. Obviously, you have a lot of campus resources, but Safe Harbor is also a resource for you. If you are experiencing domestic violence or need some place to turn, in addition to an amazing organization for you to get involved with while you're here in Clemson. So Safe Harbor is the domestic violence organization that serves upstate South Carolina, and we provide a continuum of services for domestic violence survivors and their families throughout Greenville, Anderson, Pickens, and Oconee counties. And what those services look like is if somebody is experiencing domestic violence, the way they get to us is by calling our 1-800 crisis line helpline that operates, as you can imagine, every single minute of every single day of the entire year. And on the other end of that phone is somebody who is trained to do an intake with someone who's experiencing domestic violence. And so we ask them at the end of the intake, how can we help you? And a lot of times what that looks like is an emergency shelter. And this is for a person who's experiencing violence right now and needs to leave their home because it is no longer a safe place for them to be. And our emergency shelters, we have one in Greenville, in Anderson, as well as Oconee. Due to COVID-19, we are also operating off-site hotel spaces for families who cannot either abide by COVID policies and or feel safer or more secure in their own suite. We've had to make so many changes, obviously, as everyone has, but we are so grateful to be still operating our emergency shelter spaces. We've had to reduce a little bit of our bed counts, but we are still operating and making sure that our families and our survivors are kept safe during this time. I think a lot of people are asking, so is it true? Are domestic violence calls increasing? And well, we don't have the numbers quite yet to say, yes, they've increased. But what we can say is anecdotally, when our survivors are reaching out to us on the helpline, what we can report is that these calls are becoming more and more serious. So one of the things that we do on the phone is we do a lethality assessment, judging how risky is this situation, how likely is a potential injury or death prominent in this case. And our lethality numbers have gone through the roof since COVID has happened. And this is something that we're grappling with as an organization. As many of you might have heard, South Carolina has a very long, serious history with domestic violence. We are back in the top 10. We are ranked number 6 for the number of women who are murdered by men each year. And we've only been out of the top 10 one time in the history of this statistic. That was last year. We went all the way down to number 11. But the reality is that we linger right in the top 10 consistently. Safe Harbor is aware of this trend. And not only that, and here's the other part of that statistic I want to share with you and why our partnership with Clemson African American Museum is so critical is that, again, we're number 6. But when you break down that statistic, we know that African American women in the state of South Carolina are 3 times more likely to be killed by their partner. 3 times more likely, right? And so the statistic is not only high, it's higher for certain women. And it's time that we start talking about that. And it's time that we start doing something about that. So number 6 in the nation, 3 times more likely to be killed by your partner if you are an African-American or Black woman in our state. And so Safe Harbor's here with our emergency shelter services. If a situation is not needing emergency shelter services, our largest program in terms of what we offer the community is our counseling program. And this applies to college students too. We've worked with many Clemson students over the years who feel like an off-site, an off-campus counseling option is really best for their safety and for their well-being. And so our counseling program is wonderful, and we're still full service counseling through safe spaces online, as well as making exceptions for clients who need to come see us in person. And the really neat thing about our counseling program too is that it's not only offered for the survivor themselves, but we also offer our counseling program to children and those that are witnessing domestic violence. So those are, once you're in counseling and shelter program, we are helping with advocacy, legal help, transitional housing, and then of course, events like tonight, right? We can talk about these statistics and talk about what's needed, but the reality is that in order to stop this from happening, we have to provide education and prevention to our community. And so as the Director of Prevention and Outreach for our agency, we are committed to figuring out how we can stop domestic violence before it ever starts. And that's where you come in. I think as young people, you have the ability to shift our cultural norms and make it different for the next few years. And so I invite you, everyone in the room, we need your help. You can volunteer with Safe Harbor, you can donate. We're looking for helpline volunteers to train. We're looking for volunteers to come into shelters to help with childcare. There's all sorts of ways to get involved. Not to mention our holiday program that's coming up. We love treating our survivors and their families to a huge holiday celebration. So many opportunities for you to get involved. And I think, you know, as somebody who's worked at Safe Harbor for 10 years, I think that we have to figure out how to solve this problem in our backyard. And so I invite you to come fight the good fight with us at Safe Harbor and be a part of the positive change and solutions to stopping domestic violence in our community.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this point in time, I'm going to introduce Sabrina Greenlee. My glasses on. Sabrina Greenlee is a nationally celebrated community activist, author, inspirational speaker, and domestic violence survivor who has dedicated her life to facilitating women's growth and evolution. Sabrina's story is filled with cycles of abuse, teen pregnancy, and a violent attempt on her life that ultimately left her blind. Although her life has been no crystal stair, Sabrina credits her faith as the fuel that equips her with the confidence and tenacity to inspire others to repair, recreate, and restore their purpose and infinite potential. Sabrina's life is a testament to the power of prayer and her quest to equip women to overcome any obstacle resonates globally. Sabrina is a recipient of the 2020 Houston Humanitarian Awards, has been featured on ESPN, USA Today, Living in Fear, Chronicles 1 and 2, which won an Emmy, and regularly appears on local media outlets from South Carolina to Texas. Additionally, Sabrina is currently preparing for her upcoming featured film, Sabrina, an autobiography based on her life, set to be released in 2022 by Byron Studios. The South Carolina native, mother of 4 and grandmother of 6, is the founder and CEO of Smooth, Inc., speaking mentally, outwardly, opening opportunities towards healing. Through this platform, Sabrina and her team aim to educate and empower as many women and children as possible through mentorship, counseling, and outreach. Sabrina's passion for her community has been the catalyst for the many domestic violence awareness programs facilitated by Smooth, Inc., such as Pretty Scars into Stars, Smooth, Santa, and the Smooth Transition Initiative. From victim to victor, Sabrina uses her voice, wisdom, and her unique experiences to inspire healing and promote transcendence from hurt and shame due to domestic violence and abuse. Help me by welcoming Sabrina Greenlee. Let's put our hands together.
Good evening. So as she said, my name is, and first I want to thank Miss Angela for inviting me. It's an honor to come back to my hometown. I'm traveling a lot, so thank you for that. It's my pleasure to be in front of you today. So I want to first talk to you. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about my story, and then I want to go into talking about domestic violence abuse and the different facets of it and how it affects us, not only mentally, but emotionally, technologically, and the different facets of abuse. But because of course, domestic violence is something that has tragically and tremendously trickled down to my family from generation to generation. It started, of course, as a little girl, seeing my mother and father not only do verbal abuse, sometimes it turned physical, and taking that and kind of going into my adolescent years, seeing, the different facets of abuse that happened early on in my childhood, and then going on into adulthood. By the time I was, I would say 17, you couldn't tell me anything. I thought I knew everything. I was with my first child. And, I really thought that I had the world at my feet, had no idea. And of course, being at that age, thinking I know everything, here comes a young man. So by the time I was 17, it started with verbal abuse, and then it became emotional. So when I say emotional, meaning that I would run home from school, and back then they had the little rotary phones. Of course, they didn't have the technology that we have now with the cell phone. So I would sit there and wait by the phone. And, back then I was 17. So, you're looking in the 80s, I pick up the phone to see if it had a dial tone. Well, I didn't know little things like that. I had no idea that, those were the first signs of emotional abuse, because I was sitting there waiting. And so it turned into mental abuse. Well, the same guy that damaged me and caused all this emotional and mental abuse, I end up marrying. So by the time it started at 14, like I said, well, all of these little things that I totally ignored. By the time I was 17, I had my first child. By the day that I turned 18, I married him. But I remember, and I ignored all of these things, and these things kind of come back to me as I, remember. But what I remember most about that time was that it started with, at 14, grabbing my face and telling me that, I don't want you to look at anybody else. Well, of course, I'm 14. As I said, I thought I knew everything. And I thought that was cute. He grabbed my face. He doesn't want me to look at other people. It's cute. He loves me. He wants to be with me. Well, by the time I was 16, I was carrying 2 black eyes. By the time I was 19, I had a broken collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, and some black eyes. My mother is here today and she can attest to all of this, but there was nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing that they could do to get me away from this guy. I ended up leaving my home at the age of 18 with my little baby. Well, little as you know, as fate would have it, by the time I was 19, I had 2 children. Marcus came. So so by the time I was 19, I had 2 children, and I too embarrassed to go back home, but too afraid to tell anyone. And so I was literally beaten every single day for 2 years. And I didn't know what was going on. I actually thought this was how I was going to die. Let me tell you the story. So I remember being in this place one day, and of course, I didn't say what I needed to say in front of his friends. I didn't act how he wanted me to act. So when I got home, I knew it was coming. I just, so we get home, and I remember running to the waterbed. And I also remember wanting to bite this waterbed. I pulled back the covers, and I thought, if I could just ingest enough of this water, then maybe I could digest enough that I would swallow enough where I could die. Because digesting this water, was better than this man beating me in the back of my head every single night. And I thought about this, and I think about this to this day, the abuse that started earlier on. And I always go back to when I talk to young girls and I tell them about the abuse, I think about this waterbed and how low I was and how fragile I was and how emotionally distracted and distorted I was at a young age. I mean, I had to be no more than 20 years old, and I wanted to die. I literally wanted to die. But moving forward, so I had so much trauma even early on, but I carried that on. So I finally got out of that marriage, got divorced by the time I was 22, but that stuck with me. I did not feel like I was worthy of being in a decent relationship or having a decent relationship. So by the time I was 31, I was dancing and doing all of these things. I had 2 or 3 different boyfriends, emotional abuse, physical, you name it, I encountered it. And I met this guy, and I remember just thinking, oh, he's cute, he's good looking. And that was my qualifications of a man, was cute and good looking. You didn't have to have morals. You didn't have to have clean tennis shoes. You didn't have to have white teeth. You didn't have to have standards. You just had to be good looking. And I just remember attracting this man and attracting him attracting me. And so I tell you this story because this is the story that almost cost me my life. And I actually was only dating this guy for 3.5 months. Can you imagine just, what we all do? We go out, we date, we attract people thinking that everything's okay. Well, 3.5 months of dating this guy, he calls me. So let me go back a little bit. What I tell my kids now is I mashed the gas. When I say mash the gas, meaning he had the keys to my home, my car, access to my children, and I all in 3.5 months. How crazy is that I allowed this man that I did not know to come in my home and have this much access to these 4 children that I care for so dearly? Well, he could care less about what I had going on, the bills, everything that I had worked for and that was so dear to me. Well, he called me to a place one day, and of course, like I did, 12 o'clock in the evening, I go there, and I'm irate because he has my car. He didn't tell me he took my car, and I go to this place. Unbeknownst to me, there was a young lady that was inside of the building. I had no idea. I didn't even know these were apartments. They didn't look like apartments. So I go out there, and he turns me around. When he turns me around, I hey, what's going on? Why are you here? And he comes out, and he turns me around, and my back is to this door, and she comes out with what I call a big gulp cup. You ever been to 7-Eleven back in the day and they had the big gulp cups? Well, that's what she used. And it was a concoction of red devil eye mixed with Clorox. And she dashes this on my face. I instantly hit the ground and a white curtain comes over my eyes. So I later find out that 17% of my body was burned. But when I think back at that time, I'm laying on my back. And all I could think about was all of these men that I dated and all of these things that has happened. At this point, I had lost 2 of my brothers. One died in a domestic violence dispute with his wife in Atlanta in 97. The other one died in 85. He was in a car wreck when my uncle was drunk driving. So here I am, I buried both of my brothers and I'm laying on my back and I'm thinking to myself, and I literally thought this, so my mom and dad has to bury 3 children. This is the way that I'm gonna die. As tough as I've been, as hard as I fought to get these 4 children, you know, where they need to be. This is how I'm gonna die. Well, he has pity on me. He decides to pick me up. He puts me in my brand new Lexus that I had only had for 2 months, and he takes me up to a gas station. And I get in there and the attendant is, oh my God, she's frantic. I'm bleeding all over the place. I can barely hold myself up. They take me back to the water fountain. I slump down. By this time, I'm losing consciousness, and they fly me to Augusta, where I later go in a coma for 1 month. And I don't even know if I'm dead or alive. They tell my children, only one of y'all can come back, and that's my 14-year-old. The other ones can come back when we pronounce her dead. They can't come back until, you know, we pronounce her dead. So they didn't expect me to live. But thank God I pulled through. A month later, I was addicted to morphine. I had to do therapy. I had to come home totally blind to my 4 children. And every form of abuse and every red flag that there was happened to me. There was so many things that I encountered in those 3.5 months. And at any point, I could have just said no, or I could have just said, you know what, I'm better than this. Or I could have said, you know what, I'm beautiful. Or, I mean, so many things that I now know was emotional abuse. The violence. And I look back on my ex-husband, and I look back on the trickling down to all the relationships, and all these relationships come down to this. Here I am fighting for my life, literally coming back home, fighting for my life. The hard part is over. I've gotten out the coma, but literally here I am wanting to commit suicide, and not even my children was enough to live for, because I failed. I was a complete, utter failure. I failed everybody I know. I failed myself, and I allowed these people to get me to the point where they felt like I was just something that they could just throw away. That was the hardest thing for me. But justice prevailed, and she ended up doing 20 years in jail. He ended up doing 1.5 years. And I'm sure that, you know, some of you have, you know, seen the story ESPN or USA Today, but hearing it from me, this is why I stand here before you and I tell the story over and over again, because as I said, when I first got up here, the emotional abuse, I mean, there were so many things. Technological abuse happened. You know, he took my phone, he deleted people out of my phone. People need to know that these things exist. And the reason I say this is because I did not think that I was being abused most of the times. When I was 14 and I was sitting there waiting on his calls, that was abuse. And when I came into my marriage and he snatched my cell phone and he deleted people out of my phone, that was technological abuse. And now we have, you know, we have technological abuse, we have emotional abuse, we have so many things, mental abuse. I mean, people are literally going through so many mental abuse. I want to change the narrative. My goal is to change the narrative from domestic violence to domestic abuse. Because when you think about abuse, because you think about violence, you think about people have to literally hit people. When we think about domestic violence, we think about a man hitting a woman. But have you ever thought about a mother picking up the phone and screaming at her child? It's abuse. When you think about two sisters fighting, one may be 11, one may be 15, it's abuse. We have to change the narrative, because every time you scream at somebody, or even intimidation, the intimidation that occurs in middle school and in high school and going on to adult years, you know, the bullying, it's abuse. It doesn't have to be violent to be abusive. We have to understand that it happens. What happened to me did not have to happen. If only I had thought for a second, this is abuse. But when I think about domestic violence, that can't be me. That's not me. But I ended up in the hospital with 2 cracked ribs and a broke collarbone. And guess what I did? I went back because he called and said, I love you, and I'll never do it again. And I said, okay, somebody has to help me raise these children. I did not think I knew at that point that it was physical abuse, but I did not have the mental capacity to understand that it was mental, it was verbal, it was emotional. Places like Safe Harbor, as the young lady said, you know, has these type of the foundations like my Smooth and Safe Harbor in this area. You know, I pray that, you know, women get help, seek help, get out. You know, I talk about taking your power back all the time, but I literally, utterly had to fight and scrap my way back to taking my power back. My story is one of a success story, but I've stood in front of families, I've shook hands, I've hugged for so many women that has passed on and died at the hands of an abuser, and people that, you know, just did not think their life was worth anything, just like they didn't think my life was worth anything. We have to change the narrative of how we see domestic violence. And this month is October, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We all need to be mindful. We need to share this message. We need to understand that it's not always violent. It turns violent. But by the time it turns violent, this is when these women are going into places like Safe Harbor and running for shelter, or they're calling, you know, places like my organization, Smooth. But if we can only understand that it doesn't have to get to that point, and just like myself, you know, understanding that abuse is when one of you get in your car today and your daughter did something that she just, you know, that wasn't pleasing to you. Well, screaming at her is not an option, because that young girl will take that and she'll understand that it's right then you just committed emotional abuse and verbal abuse. And then you wonder why 10 years from now that she's screaming at her children, or she's in a relationship. But understand that it trickles down from generation to generation. And as I said, I saw my mother and my father, you know, screaming and, you know, going through things. And yes, my mom, you know, she got out early. She said, you know what, I choose my children, and she moved us, you know, to here. And so that's why I'm a native of Clemson by way of Easley. Only 15 minutes. So thank you, mama. But I just, but no, seriously, I just want us to be mindful that this month is October, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And that's just what that means. Be aware of the warning signs of domestic violence. As I say, changing the narrative to abuse. It's abuse. And we all have to share this and be mindful of it. And as I said, I want to conclude with, you know, Safe Harbor is an amazing place. I've collaborated with them a lot of times. I've spoken for them. We did fundraisers. Everyone there is amazing. And I feel like we need to, you know, just be mindful that Safe Harbor does exist. And we want to help. We want to share the message that Safe Harbor, you know, is a shelter. It's a safe place. It's a safe haven. But Smooth, my organization, is for women that are transitioning from Safe Harbor and finding their way and giving hope to the hopeless, so that, you know, once they get the courage to get out of a domestic violence relationship, we want to give them the courage and the, you know, to stay out, to stay out of that relationship. It's very vital that we understand that when women are coming out, and if you know someone that is coming out, call Smooth, DM us, call us and talk to us. We have a program that we're starting where we can help women come and, safely come out of these situations, and hopefully they'll stay out. And I pray that my message gives you one of encouragement and power. And because I am a woman that made it through. And as I said, I got my 4 children into college. It was not easy, okay? But I decided to break all of the generational curses that was before me. I decided enough is enough. I've taken my power back. And when I decided to take my power back, my children saw that courage. They saw that bravery. And they said, if mama can do this, and she's blind and she's went through all of this. And so what I exemplify today, I do the exact same thing every single day. Every single day, I exemplify power and bravery and courage, not only for my children, but for my grandchildren, because they're looking at me and they see this, and I need to be an example. As of everyone here needs to be an example and understand the message that I want to leave with you today is that changing the narrative of domestic violence, it can also be domestic abuse. We have to change the narrative and understand that it starts with us. It starts with you. It starts in your home so that this doesn't trickle down from generation to generation. Thank you.
At this time, we'll take some questions from the audience and from online. Are there any questions for Sabrina Greenlee? Any online? Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Yeah. Mhm. Oh, absolutely. That's a really good question. I think it starts with understanding that I was abused and that, the path of forgiveness. So I talk about unforgiveness a lot of times. I think if I could kind of break it down. So what I did was, the one thing that I did was I set my children down, and I cannot tell you that I knew exactly what I was doing. I just wanted to do something different. So when I made up my mind to change the stigma in my home, and I wanted to break the generational curses, I set my children down and I told them, I'm sorry, please forgive me for everything that I've been through and everything that I put you through. And how can I make this better? Talk to me. And I think the one thing that people need to understand is, if you really want to see what you did or look at yourself, start with your children, because they will tell you the truth. I wasn't ready for it. I was not ready for it, but they told me some things that I did not want to hear. And I had to take that. And that was where my healing began, was with my children. And I think that when people, whether you're a male or female, you go through generational trauma, because it doesn't always have to be abuse. As I said, it doesn't always have to be violent. When you just go through trauma, whether it's molestation or all of these things, I think the first thing is learning how to forgive yourself. And that takes time, and that takes affirmations, and that takes waking up and and understanding that, you know, it happened, but it does not have to continuously happen. But for me, it was first telling my children, because my forgiveness started in my home. I needed to get that right before I could go out and talk to anyone. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it. You say allies? Okay. Oh, when people who are allies who are coming out, you know, like, okay. So to answer that question is, I think that I mean, it's really hard because what I do is there's no one set question. I think the main thing is to understand that they need the time and the patience to what they went through and just be there. The main thing is understanding that it happened to them, be not sympathetic, but empathetic to the situation of everything that has went on, and just be there. And so meet them where they are. If they want help, call now. If they want help, get help. If they want counseling, assist them with counseling. If they just want to talk, then let them talk. But just know that you can't make somebody do something that they're not ready to do. And I think that's the main thing is, like, you can't call 911 if they're not ready to leave. As I said earlier, I was in the hospital and I didn't even think it was that bad, because just because, you know, and as I say, just because he abused me, love is not like a light switch. It just doesn't turn off just because somebody beats you or hits you or treats you poorly. And so I think, you know, just being an ally is actually just having the patience to be there with them, but understanding that you could make the difference in a life or death situation. So always be positive, always be encouraging, and just speak affirmation, speak life into them consistently. You have to let them know that they're better. And in the event that they want to get out, you be the first one to help get them out. Hi, how? Good. Mhm. That's a good question, Alicia. I think that if I could say anything, that would be to educate, to educate, to educate, to educate. We cannot expect people to go out and know something that they're not educated on. And the main thing is having impact stories, getting survivors in their faces, getting programs or events that put survivors, I feel like you need to first have people like myself and other survivors to hear the impact of what domestic violence does in the home. You could even have young people speak, or, you know, but definitely survivors. I feel like it's very vital that that you educate them, because we can talk about statistics all day long, but does that really put it to where people really understand what's really going on? You know, during this pandemic, domestic violence has risen like nationally, like 200%. Could you imagine being in the home with the person that's molesting you? There's no way out. And so I think this is the time now to really, really educate them. And like I said, we can sit up and talk about this all day long, but what what Miss Angela just did, actually having me come here today to tell my story, you know, because she could have said, you know, hey, I want you to talk about, you know, the pandemic and how it's risen, but she wanted you guys to hear my story, to really get a firsthand, you know, glimpse into my life and what happened. And I think that's important, Alicia, that you get people like myself in front of people so that they can really understand the dynamics and the devastation of domestic violence. Yeah, I was going to say Safe Harbor has a crisis hotline. I've called on them many a times when, because my organization, we don't handle like immediate crisis, and they do have a crisis hotline. And Smooth has a website that some of my members are so graciously here. It's smoothinc.org that you can go to and DM Miss Tasha. She's here and she's always responding to people every day. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Oh, that is an amazing question. I was back there in the room going over the technological aspects of domestic abuse. And Alana, when I want her to come up here and tell you, because she has been telling me about this. This is her question. When I tell you this girl has been like drilling this in my head, you have to talk about technological. I want you to tell people about the different facets of technological abuse. I put her on the spot, sorry.
She sure did, and I'm not a public person, so hard.
Take your
Can
mask off
can
and
you
tell her.
hear me? Okay,
Go.
sorry. Okay, I'm not a public speaker, I'm sorry. But there's so many different facets, there's so many levels to abuse that we don't know of. Like
Mhm.
we said, stereotypically, we think of a man abusing a woman.
Mhm.
There's also same-sex relationships, there's also women perpetrators against men, and then there's levels to it that leads up to it. So emotional, like attacking somebody's character.
Mm.
You should always feel safe privately. You should always feel comfortable in your skin. You should never feel like somebody's controlling you.
Mhm.
So emotionally would be somebody tearing down the way you are as a person. They're belittling you so they can control you.
Mhm.
You know, so anything that leads up to that is emotional abuse.
Mhm.
Technological will go more into like snatching your phone. Where are you? Send me your location. Deleting your messages, sending pictures of you to other people too. That's called revenge porn, by the way. It's people cannot do that. And so different facets to that as well, like checking your social media. What are you doing? Always controlling you and trying to figure out, because then that leads up to, okay, then eventually I'm going to start physically getting onto you as well. So just leading up to that. So definitely, if you feel uncomfortable with what somebody is doing to you, if you feel outside yourself, you feel like you are not safe, then you are being abused.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you. That was a good question, by the way. And I was like, they were preparing me for it, but I was like, girl, you got this. Huh? I feel that is really good, because I sit there in my bed for an entire year And I think the main thing that was really devastating to me was the thought that she was going to get away with this and I did absolutely nothing wrong. And then a year in, of course, we go to court for 3 days, everybody's there, and she gets sentenced to 20 years. And it's like a light bulb come on that day. And I was like, yes. So I could only imagine, I could not imagine someone going through what I went through and then not getting the justice that they deserve. And I've been asked to speak on this a couple of times, and I've had questions about this. I think that there's healing either way. What helped me heal was understand that, and I know this is and I know that this may sound a little strange, but I was prepared for justice not to be served either way when I decided that I had to look at what I did to get in that situation and the path that I took to allow someone to do that to me, to get in that situation. And when I began to see what I did and what part I did, it helped me understand that when I went to that courtroom before justice was served, I was prepared to go home either way, with or without justice. And I think that it goes back to the warning signs and everything. We don't deserve what has happened. Nobody deserves to get beat. Nobody deserves for the justice system to fail. But we need to understand that sometimes it does. But also, as I said, if you feel that they've not served you, then you definitely just need to seek counseling. Don't let that define you or be the end all. I unfortunately I just started counseling about 6 months ago. And so that's like, oh my God, I should have been getting counseling. So I feel like before you get on the path of just kind of thinking that, hey, no one cares because you didn't get justice, it's not always going to be the case. I did fortunately get justice, but if you do not get justice, then I think you need to kind of turn that energy in on yourself, seek counseling, and start working on yourself and understand that, God has a bigger plan for everybody. And that may not be the path that may not be the plan that you see on earth, but trust and believe he has a plan for them. So the woman that attacked me got out May 1st of 2020, right during the pandemic when I'm sitting home by myself and I have nowhere to go. She got out, but she did serve 18 and a half years. And when I got a letter in the mail, May 3rd, that she had gotten out, I actually, my best friend read the letter to me. I went back there in my bedroom. I fell to my knees and I began to pray for her. And I pray that she prospers and everything that she touches turns to gold, because I know that the more she is blessed, the more I am abundantly blessed. Anybody that's online that might wish to speak and ask a question, just raise your hand and I can promote you to speak. Thank you all for coming. This has been amazing. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming out. On the table there, we have some additional information. The Arts Center has a film that they're showing and it's called "And So I Stayed." And there will be a panel discussion as well. The dates and time is on the flyer, and it's also one of those QR codes that you can scan. Again, I thank you for coming out to the Clemson Area African American Museum, and I hope to see you again. Do visit us frequently on our social media until we are up and running with our exhibits. And as I mentioned earlier, for Kwanzaa, we will be celebrating 5 days of Kwanzaa. Even though it's a 7-day celebration, we will celebrate 5 days and we'll combine everything, December 26th through the 30th. So even the students, if you're around, do come back. It will be here. And I, again, thank you for coming out. Please, if you need assistance, there are different tables with information. Do collect some. It's good literature to have, even if it's to help someone else. And journey safely back to campus and to your homes. Have a good evening.